everybody, and good afternoon. I am very happy to be here in Medellin, in Colombia, and I've talked after some of my colleagues, Charles from the United States and Matthias, with regards to this European vision. I am going to show you a perspective that it's not, I mean, it is a global view because I'm part of AFIF, that it's an international association, as well as a Latin America view, which is a bit different from the European outlook. The first thing that I would like to point out when it comes to the animal production is to show the importance that the animal production has in the country, in the world. So we are talking about 1 billion people, and these are official data from FAO, because we learned that what the industry says doesn't have lots of credibility, but what FAO says, it's indeed true, and we accept that. So we work side by side with FAO, and there are many people that work in animal production in the country. Not only related to that, we're talking about the third source of income worldwide. And here I am talking about 1.2 billion trillions. And in English, it would be 1.2 trillion dollars, right? Because we're actually talking about 1.2 billions, which is the figure in Spanish. Uh, and it's also responsible for 18% of the calories of the human feed, as well as the B12, vitamin, iron, zinc, and calcium. Our sector is very important. And the most important thing, 86% of what is offered to animals in terms of food is not take, taken advantage of for the human consumption. In other words, the animal takes advantage of nutrients that would be disposed, that wouldn't have an important function. And I say that to you because there was a huge pressure to change people's diet for them to consume less animal protein, but it didn't really work. This is a graph that we cannot really see clearly, but it comes from a company, Video Meat, and supposedly they thought that they would substitute 30% of animal protein in our diets. And what happened? Wall Street, when they launched the company, they met $240 per share. Nowadays, it's worth $6. Very, not that much, right? Because the idea of changing the animal protein diet to the didn't really work because it's very hard to change eating habits. And what we see now is an increase, a demand increase every year for animal protein. And here, I would like to say how, as Latin America, right, that our participation in the emissions is very low. All Latin America, Caribbean, we represent 8.1% of the emissions. And we have already stepped out of the low emissions when we contrast to the global average, the greatest emission of CO2 emission is energy sector, the energetic industry. 44% of the emissions come from the coal burning. So agriculture comes in second place, and it's very far from the carbon emission. But the pressure is always very high and intense in all sectors. We don't have any questions about that, any doubts. The Latin average is a bit different. Our energy is cleaner compared to the global energy. We have more hydroelectric energy and this drive to have solar, solar power and also wind power. That's why our sectors are not that much affected because when we contrast Latin America with the industrial sector, our emissions are relevant. But here, especially when it comes to Brazil, the change in terms of the use of land is very impacts a lot. And I mean, we're talking about uh, getting rid of a whole forest and plant soybeans. And the rules of the world in the last, I don't know, 20 years, in other words, what we've been doing for the last 20 years, got into this package of new trends. And it has a big impact when it comes to the environment standpoint. When it comes to Brazil, this is even bigger because we have lots of forests. In the last 20 years, everything that was suppressed in terms of the forests is part of this calculation, but livestock and animal production has a much greater impact for us compared to Europe and other regions of the world. That's why we see all this pressure when it comes to animal production. Um, I come from animal nutrition. There's no way for you to produce low emission meat if we don't improve animal feed. When it comes to pork, when it comes to emissions feeding those animals, it's something very large. We have around 63% of emissions due to pork and pork feed that comes from animal feed. And these are data from FAO as well as European Union. And when it comes to the cattle livestock, it's a little bit less, but it has more to do with the fermentation of rodents. And the market, we see a equivalent carbon emission. When it comes to poultry and pork, we see that. And fowl, when we talk about animal protein, the pressure goes directly to animal feed. And everything is connected. We're talking about fat, meals, meat meals, corn, soy, and everything that is offered when it comes to animal feed. That's why we have a huge pressure. Why? Because nowadays, us who are working in this trading, protein trading, we know that the carbon emissions are going to cost lots of money. Maybe it's not going to be a cost today, but maybe in 2, 3 years, the cost will come. And we started seeing a huge global competition to see who produces the cleanest animal protein or with the lowest emission. And it's healthy to have this kind of competition among countries. Each one is developing new technologies, trying to improve their efficiency, and also trying to deploy a better work. So one compares to another, and we compare in Latin America with the United States, Canada, Europe, but the reality is that the our sector is going to feel the pressure, the impact to decrease the emissions. And we are working hard towards that. And I believe that Latin America has the condition of becoming maybe one of the regions with a great capacity, production capacity with the lowest emissions. And here we just keeping up with what I was saying before, how we measure the carbon footprint. This is something essential because the world believes in data figures. And nowadays, we have in each country, we gotta come up with their own methodology to measure the carbon footprint. So us, when it comes to animal nutrition, we need to do that. And
I'm very glad to see that the United States in the rendering sector, they're already doing that because this will be a global and necessary demand. So any product that comes into animal feed will have its carbon footprint. So the countries will need to sell meat with carbon footprint. So the rendering sectors that work in a biocircular economy, that carry out great work, they will have better conditions to formulate animal diets because the lower the emissions, the higher is the probability for profit for the producer because all markets will require not only the amount of protein and fat, but also will want to know what the carbon footprint is. That is the new reality. So we are now beginning this work, as you can see here in the TFRI. This is one of the information banks that we are trying to align and harmonize because what's difficult for us in sustainability is to speak the same language, right? If each country has a different rule, if they uh, do different kinds of math, then the results would be different. So we need to harmonize everything, have the same measurements and rulers for everything. FAO is seen as a UN entity. So there will be a rule and no one will discuss that. So here in Brazil, we used FRY and we found out that all the products, be that corn, soybean, sugarcane, if we don't carry out a life cycle analysis, someone will decide on those numbers and they will find an arbitrary carbon footprint. So the world doesn't believe that each region has its own emissions. So, for example, Colombia will have to carry out analysis that Brazil will have to carry out as well. So each country will have to do their own. So every time we improve our carbon footprint, we gain, uh, we become more competitive. So in Brazil's case, we're using Embrapa, and they're carrying out this work in the case of soybeans. And the emissions we had was 4.6. And after this work, we were able to decrease the carbon footprint to 1.1. So a country that does not carry out this analysis for the life cycles will have any kind of numbers here and even bigger costs. And it's interesting. So, for example, I asked that FAO why Argentina has such high emissions. So, it's a country that has great lands, and that's because they didn't do the work. They didn't analyze life cycles. And those who don't show their numbers, they end up having the worst qualification or worst rating. That's why the rendering industry needs to do its work, needs to show its numbers. Today in Brazil, I'm working with the coffee industry because coffee has a negative footprint. Coffee absorbs more CO2, and so they're able to get money not only selling coffee, but selling carbon credits. But all of this has to be proved. And we're in a huge global competition to show who's most competitive in emissions. So I'll ask you, I'm someone from animal nutrition, so I'll require from the rendering industry to tell us what is the carbon footprint for poultry meal, swine meals, bovine meals, and from fat. That will be mandatory because all of that goes through a calculator, and us here at Animal Nutrition, we will send this data to the poultry producers, the swine producers, and they will clarify the numbers. So that's a new reality. And we need to be uh have our eyes wide open for this. So these points are very important nowadays on a global level. So circular economy rendering is the sector who's been working the best. So they carry out circular economy. They've been doing this for years. And we want more sectors like yours. So they carry out good environmental work. They use protein that would be lost. And this protein also has amazing nutritional value. And we're working with these risks. Everything in the world can be risky. We have a risk for salmonella and others. And we're working with this in the industry. So we're looking at temperature, processing, and what we want today, at least in animal nutrition, to improve more and more the use of byproducts, waste, co-products. In Japan, we see them using 30% of reprocessed food in animal feed. That is the current global need. And regarding grains, ingredients, and fats, we need lower emissions. Now, agriculture in Brazil is worried about decreasing greenhouse gas emissions by using biofertilizers and agriculture that leads to lower emissions because that goes into animal and human feed. So, technology and development is extremely important for all of us, and everything can be used, including insects. Why not? If insects can add anything that could be wasted, how about transforming that into good quality protein? We must use everything. And then we'll keep on working with zootechnical additives. And we now have additives that reduce the production of methane coming from ruminants. And new technology will come in more and more. We're open to that. And obviously, we will continue fighting to decrease the use of antibiotics. I would like to say quickly that biofuels are part of our sector or how they are within our sector, right? So the growth has been very high. So corn today, so corn ethanol, which wasn't produced in Brazil before, has been growing and now represents an important participation in ethanol. It has a big share. And all of this residue is used. The biofuel sector in Brazil is very strategic and its growth is very strong. And that's what supports the prices in agriculture for soybean, corn. We will not compete with that. Animal nutrition will use everything that's possible. Like, the case of biodiesel in Brazil, there's a mandate here, right? We need to include biodiesel and look at its growth. And it has been a very expressive growth. Of course, soybean is the biggest contributor in this aspect, but we also have animal fat and other kinds of fat. And we are continuing to grow. There is a new law called future fuel, and that will increase 1% per year the use of biodiesel in diesel. So in countries like Brazil, they're already investing in biodiesel and all other biofuels like SAF, and we will continue to do so. So in our case specifically, the carbon footprint for biofuels is much lower than electric because in electric fuels we need to look at minerals, we need to think about the life cycles of batteries and the analysis changes completely, right? Carbon footprint in the production of these batteries is extremely high. So you see, we prefer biofuels. Here we have data that come from the International Energy Agency. So what's being substituted, how biofuels substitute petroleum, it's a very low level. So we have a condition to enhance this, to produce much more. So the global demand will truly be high, both in ethanol and biodiesel. And to give you an idea here, you can see that in Brazil, the production of sugarcane and corn is increasing. So there is a lot of investment when it comes to ethanol. And we've been investing in the aviation market in SAF. And they require mandates because no one will use SAF to do good by the planet only. A few countries in general only use SAF because the laws determine so. And now it is mandatory to use a certain amount of biofuel. And in South America, actually, most countries are following this mandate, be it for ethanol or biodiesel. And we believe this will expand. So I was talking to Charles and about the reality of the United States, and the mandate in the United States is by state and it's not a federal mandate. In Europe, it's not mandatory yet, but the trend is that more and more countries and regions will have the same mandate. So they will be obliged to reduce their carbon footprint. That's what happens currently in aviation. Uh, Planes can't use batteries today. But for companies to use SAF, be that biodiesel or ethanol, it should be mandatory in order to substitute part of the kerosene in aviation. So this is a bet we're investing in, right? Animal nutrition is a great renderer. It will take advantage of all these subproducts, co-products, byproducts, and it will offer a better quality in animal feed. We're all united uh, for this same goal. I believe the global condition is a bit different than what happens in Europe. So biofuels, they have the conditions to grow more in Latin America than in Europe or even Asia. And we need to take advantage of this opportunity. I think animal fat, for example, biodiesel has given us a great opportunity in the market. They opened up doors. We need to keep in mind that the energy market is much bigger than the food market, and the energy market has no barriers. When we're looking at energy from one country to the other, there are no barriers. But when you sell food, you have barriers, rules, regulations, and all kinds of challenges. So the energy market gives us the ability to grow and have international competition. And it's quite interesting. We need to observe this and take care of the carbon footprint. We need to do the math here. And that's what I believe, and I hope that all organizations will do. And I hope they do the same as NARA is doing in the United States. So, with that, I want to allow time for questions, but I want to emphasize that I'm at your disposal. Be Latina is harmonizing rules, and we're working together with IFIF to, and we're concerned with a healthy competition globally, right? We don't need to be protective. We need to search for technologies that help us all. This sector is very important for us. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll end my presentation. I'm at your disposal for whatever you need. And if you have any questions, here in Brazil, we are investing heavily in biofuels, and the rendering sector is very important for all of us. Thank you.